Hey guys, Mr. Carizzi and Ms. Pignich here to help you walk you through the SGO spreadsheet. So you should have received the SGO spreadsheet from our last set of emails from the faculty meeting. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open it up and we're going to input all of our data in the top left corner. So we're going to put our name, our school, our grade level or levels depending on what you're teaching. If you have multiple grade levels, then you should put all of the grade levels that you are teaching. Ms. Pignich used commas when putting in the grade level because if you don't and you use dashes instead, the Excel spreadsheet will think that you're putting in a date, so you make sure to use commas in between the grade levels. The course that you are teaching, so we're talking about Honors Algebra 2 with Trig, and the interval of our SGO, which should be from 9/2017 until 4/2018. Okay, so the next thing we're going to want to do is pull in our students for this particular SGO. So a couple ways you could do that. One, you can run a report out of Genesis, which will input all your students into an Excel spreadsheet. So let's pretend we ran this report. So we're going to copy our students' names, and we're going to paste them right into the SGO spreadsheet. You can do this manually, but we figure if you run the report, it will save you a lot of time. So then we have 5 columns to pick. Our first column is going to be the student's prior year grade in the class. So for Ms. Pignich, she would be looking at all of her students' either Algebra 1 or Geometry scores. If you are teaching freshmen or students that have not taken this particular course before, then instead of using the prior year's grades, you're going to use some sort of pre-assessment that you will have to give. If you have a student that transferred in, or only one freshman, and you have to give them a pre-assessment, then you must give the pre-assessment for every student in your class. You cannot just have one student who gets a pre-assessment and everybody else who gets their prior year grades. Okay, so Ms. Pignich is going to copy and paste in her scores. Okay, our second column is going to be our post-assessment, which is usually either a unit or chapter 1 test given before October, or at least before the due date of the SGO. She's going to copy and paste those scores in. And our last column is going to be for attendance. Now, as you can see, as we were starting to input the data to the right, the SGO spreadsheet gives you suggested data for tiering. If you are using an SGO which has less than 30 students, you are only going to use a 2-tiered system. So what you're going to do for your grade, for your pre-assessment or prior year grade, you're going to go down to the bottom, and there's a little drop-down box, and you're going to select 2. You're going to do the same thing for your post-assessment or Unit 1 test. But for attendance, we're not going to use the suggestions that were given to us because our administrative team has given us what they want the attendance tiering to look like. So if we're using a 2-tiered system, you're going to go down to the bottom, and your high tier, which is tier 1, should have absences of 3 or less. So all you're going to do is put in a 3, and then your next one will automatically assume that will be 3 or higher. So you do not have to put anything else in. If we're running a 3-tiered system, in which case your SGO will have 30 students or more, then we're going to change our first 2 columns to 3. And for attendance, our tier 1 will be for students with 1 absence or less. And our medium tier students will be for 2 to 3 absences. And then you do not put anything in the 3rd tier because the data or the SGO spreadsheet will automatically assume that your 3rd tier will be for 4 absences or more. So you'll just put a 1, a 3, and then you'll be done. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to the bottom and we're going to change our tab to the full tiering and targets. So the spreadsheet will automatically put your students into the preparedness group. Okay, so you can see that Barry was in a high tier for both his pre-assessment and his Unit 1 assessment, but his attendance put him in the middle tier group, but he still averaged out to be the tier 1 group. Now, if you feel Barry is a student that is not a tier 1 student, but maybe a tier 2 student, you can override it to the right. And you can drop it down, and you can pick the tier in which you feel Barry is suited. At the top,
keeping him at tier 1.
I'm going to keep back. At the top, you can see the number of students in which tiers they're in. The spreadsheet, through its suggestions, will try and evenly space out the two students amongst the tiers. Okay, so in our tier 1, we have 5 students, in our tier 2, 5 students, and our third tier, 4 students. The next column we're going to focus on is the target score on our SGO assessment. So for Ms. Pick's Algebra 2 honors class, her high tier students should score an 85 or above on their assessment, on their final assessment. Her medium tier students should score a 75 or above, and her low tier students should score a 65 or above. Her SGO assessment is scored out of 100 points. And the next thing we want to talk about is the percentage of the students in your group that need to hit the target score for you to get a 3 on your evaluation. So if you want a 3 on your SGO, Ms. Pick is going to have 70% of the students in her high tier score an 85 or above. She'll do the same thing for her middle tier and the same for her low tier.
2%.
Now you can see to the column to the right, for her to score a 3 on her evaluation, 4 out of her 5 students in her high tier need to get an 85 or above. 4 out of 5 in her middle tier need to get a 75 or above, and 3 out of 4 in her low tier need to get a 65 or above. Please don't forget that when you do your target percentage groups, that you have to put 70%. You have to put the percent symbol. If you don't, it'll come back as invalid. Now, you do not have to keep your target percentage score at 70%. If you feel that that's an unfair amount of students to score, you can change it to, say, 60%. So if we're going to change our score to 60, you can see that the amount of students that you need to hit your target score. So you can decide on the target score, but it must be agreed upon with you and whatever administrator that you're meeting with, whether that is an okay target percentage. So the last thing we're going to do now is we're going to go down to the bottom left, and you can see we have to hit these 3 little dots over here to get to our SGO form. Okay, so we're in the final step now. You can see everything has been inputted from what we did originally. The next thing you have to input, where it says please complete or copy and paste, this is where you put the standards or the rationale on how you decided that you are assessing your students on your SGO. So you'll enter that data there. And you can see that it's automatically inputted the data for our preparedness groups. In the box labeled Student Growth Objective, this is where you'll just input the data from the second tab, where we said that 70% of the students in each group will meet the target score.
If I can type, I'm sorry.
And then it asks to describe how the targets reflect ambitious and achievable scores for these students. That's something that I would suggest that you and your PLC partners decide amongst yourself what you think is appropriate for your scores and the ambitions. So we'll scroll to the bottom of the SGO. It should be completed at this point. This is all the data that we filled in on the second tab. Anything else that you see filled in is for later on when you finalize the SGO. As far as the notes and the review at the SGO conference, that is to be done at the end of the year when you finalize your SGO. So you are done. The last thing you do is you'll just go up and print it. And you will only print active sheets. So if you click on that, you can see there's a couple of different selections. And you will only print the active sheets, not the entire workbook.